So Game of Thrones Season 6 Episode 2 recap. Spoilers ahead. And here it is, the return of Jon Snow. Well, we all were wondering when it was going to happen and how it was going to happen. Some people thought it would be later in the season, some sooner. Episode 2, end of Episode 2 is when it began. His return. And I guess everyone sort of guessed how it was going to happen. I personally had my money on the Red Priestess Melisandre doing it, even though she'd lost her faith, as it seems. And whether her faith was involved or not, she seems to have done the trick. We're assuming, unless it's a huge coincidence, she happened to cast her spell on him at the end of the episode. And after everyone had left, he suddenly wakes up. So, yeah, we're assuming it's her. I think it is her. As we saw in, I think it's season 2 or season 3, with the other priest, the other Red Priest, who kept bringing back Dondarrion 6 times, or however many times it was. I mean, that priest had sort of lost his faith too. I mean, he was drinking, he was, he was whoring. Yeah, he wasn't doing very priestly things, and he was able to bring back his friend 6 times. So faith perhaps isn't quite as big a deal for this as just simple power. So how they channel this power, whether it is through this god or whether it is through some article, perhaps Melisandre's necklace is the power, I don't know. I'm sure will be explained down the line. But anyway, Jon is back and fantastic. You know, let's just hope he's the Jon we all remember. We don't know until next episode, but can't wait to see what happens now. But obviously that was the end of the episode, so I just had to get that off my chest. But let's go back to the beginning of the episode. Wow, I mean, what a start! I mean, you had Davos back in the room with Jon Snow's friends, Alliser fallen outside with the rest of the Night Watch, ready to bash down the door, and take Davos and the men. And I have to admit, it was quite funny actually seeing. I mean, poor Davos. I loved that character, and I love the guy who plays him. He plays him so well. He's so down to earth. He's literally the everyman, and I think everyone can relate to him. But you know, when he's standing there saying, "You know, I'm not a very good fighter, so I apologise for what you're about to see," draws his sword. And everybody else draws their swords. And I'm looking there, you've got this small room with this big table in the middle with Jon Snow on it. And you've got this like 6 guys, 5-6 guys, and they're all holding these huge, long swords. And I'm thinking, this isn't going to work, guys. You start swinging those around, you're more likely to chop each other's heads off than the bad guys coming through the door. But luckily it didn't get to that because the wildlings turned up just in time. Just in the nick of time, and they brought their pet giant with them. And wow, he must have got the best scene at the beginning of this episode. I mean, he was doing his whole Hulk and Loki act on one of the poor Night Watch who whether by accident or by purpose, fired a crossbow bolt into him. But yeah, that was a laugh out loud moment. I was a bit disappointed. I mean, smash through the gates, race in, and the Night Watch, who are supposedly, you know, the people who are defending the realms from the winter that's coming, you know, from the White Walkers and everything beyond the wall. These are the guys who are tasked to do this. And as soon as the wildlings rush through the gate, do they attack? No. They just sort of like stand there all confused, and it's like, oh, what do we do? You know, and there's a huge giant there, fair enough. You know, and then they all sort of like just drop their swords, much to Alliser Thorne's disdain. And then all the guys who betrayed Jon get thrown in the dungeons. If they're anything like the cells in the book, in the book, the dungeons are carved out of the ice of the wall. So you're basically kept in an ice prison. Not a very nice place to be, but I would have still liked to see Alliser get his comeuppance. Now, this guy has been bugging me since I saw him. You know, he's so... Guys, it's just a dick. He really is. He's a terrible guy. And he just does everything for ego, for vanity's sake, for his own power, as so many people in Game of Thrones do. Um, and he's been fighting Jon all the way, and I just wanted to see the wildlings turn up and deal with him. Because if it hadn't been for Jon, if it was down to Alistair, the wildlings would still be on the other side of the wall, probably about to get wiped out. So they had more than enough reason to kill him, but instead they just threw him in the dungeons. So, and then obviously Davos goes off to find Melisandre and tries to convince her to come and try and resurrect Jon Snow. But before we see that, as I say, that comes at the end of the episode. Before that, we move on to King's Landing, where you see Mycella's. Well, you don't actually see Mycella's funeral. You see Cersei trying to get to Mycella's funeral, and she's blocked by the King's guards, who tell her that the King's orders are that she has to remain in the Red Keep. She can't go to the funeral. And it cuts to a rather tense moment where you've got the Mountain standing behind her, and the guards are like, oh, God, we don't want to fight this guy. And eventually Cersei backs down and goes back to her quarters. But, it's the first time you sort of see the King, her son, Tommen. It's sort of like perhaps flexing his muscles, maybe. You kind of hope he is, because this kid, I know he's a kid, but he's been a bit of a pushover. He's sort of like very weak king. Joffrey, for all of him being, such a psychotic idiot, he was very strong, and he made his mind up, and he did what he wanted. Tommen, on the other hand, is just a kid who has no idea what to do. He's being pushed from pillar to post. But his dad's back now with Jaime, and Jaime basically says, look, go to your mother, apologise to her, and see how it goes. And that's what he ends up doing. So he goes to see Cersei, apologises to Cersei, and says, I want you to help me become a strong king. Cersei instantly forgives him. Now, I think a lot of people are saying, well, she did that because she's just so she loves her son, it's her only child she's got left. And yes, definitely that's a part of it. She does love her kids. There's no getting around that, and that's obvious in the series. But also, I think that after being blocked, from going to the funeral, she was a little bit worried that Tommen was out of her grasp now. She was in the previous series because Margaery had her hooks in him, and she was worried she'd lost him. So being told by the King's guards, well, no, sorry, the King says you've got to stay here, and that's the end of it. That might have put doubt into her head that Tommen is standing up for himself now and no longer needs her. In which case, all of her power vanishes. So for him to come to her and apologise and ask her to make him a stronger king, she has all of that back. She has her son back, and she has her power back. And she becomes the power behind the throne again. So I think it was possibly a 50-50 sort of thing there, but I honestly think that in the end she was happy because she didn't have to worry anymore. And she'd got back everything that she was worried that she'd lost. Back up north, you've got Ramsay and Roose Bolton still plotting. Roose's wife has a baby boy. And the Maester comes and and tells Roose this while he's in conference with Ramsay and Lord Karstark, who was from the family who betrayed Robb Stark, because Robb beheaded the dad, the head of the Karstark family last season, or the season before. I can't remember which one it was. But they're in conference, and Roose is telling Ramsay, who suggests that they gather their armies and march on Castle Black and destroy Jon Snow, because that's obviously where Sansa's run off to. And Roose is like, no, you can't do that. If you keep acting like a wild dog, they'll put you down and feed you to the dogs. And then the Maester comes in and says, well, Lord Bolton, you've got a son. And Ramsay steps in to hug his dad, and in doing so stabs his father through the heart. Yeah, talk about Joffrey being psychotic. You had a southern psycho in Joffrey, and you got a northern psycho in Ramsay. So he kills his dad, Lord Karstark, who's obviously in on the plot, who isn't surprised, basically tells the Maester, "You will now address Ramsay as Lord, because he's now the king. He's now the Lord of the Bolton household." And Ramsay goes off, finds his dad's wife and the baby boy, takes them into the kennels, and then has his hunting hounds rip them apart. I mean, this kid is disturbed. I mean, that you didn't see it, luckily, but you could hear it. And what worries me is, with Roose dead, the final leash that was holding Ramsay in check by any regard has now gone. So Ramsay's now a loose cannon with an army and some of the Lords of the North, backing him. And so he's now going to be marching on Castle Black. Now, obviously, Jon's just come back from the dead, and he's got the wildlings behind him. He's got some of the Night Watch behind him, but he's also got the White Walkers coming down from the north. So he doesn't really have time to be fighting the Boltons. Equally, I'm sure he wants to get to Winterfell and reclaim his family's seat. So my thinking is, Sansa will get to Castle Black, rally the wildlings, the Night Watch, and some of the northern kingdoms around her, and then her and Jon will go and take back Winterfell. That's my thoughts. I don't know, because during the episode, she and Theon part ways. He takes a horse and tells her he's going to head home. Now, home in the Iron Islands. However, the suggestion has been floated that perhaps he'll try and get back into Winterfell, making out he's still Reek, get into position to kill Ramsay. I don't think that would work. I don't think Ramsay would trust him for a start. I think the second he turned up, Ramsay, whatever story Theon told him, Ramsay would just kill him, be done with him, and get rid of him. I honestly do. So I think Theon's probably heading home to the Grey Islands, the Iron Islands, which, if he does, he'll find a lot of turmoil. I mean, we found in this one, Balon Greyjoy gets thrown off a bridge by his brother, who's just returned. In the books, Balon falls off a bridge during a storm, just as in the episode, but you don't know it's his brother that does it. It's suggested that later on in the books that it might have been, but it's not explicitly said. But in this one, you actually see Balon and his brother fighting on the bridge, and then the brother throws Balon over. So now, with the king dead, the men of the Iron Islands have to go to a king's moot to vote on a new king, and basically every captain of a ship can vote. Yara, Balon's daughter and Theon's sister, wants to be the ruler, but she's going to have to hope that enough people vote for her. But equally, her uncle is back now, the one who killed her dad, so he's probably going for the power as well. So in the book, the uncle does get the power and he does become king, but we'll just have to wait and see how that one bears out. But if that goes any differently, if Theon does get back to the Iron Islands, which he doesn't do in the book, that might change things up a bit. But we'll have to wait and see. In Meereen, you have the best, to my mind at least, you have the best sequence of scenes in the entire episode, where you've got Tyrion and Varys, and the immortal line that we've heard bandied around about, I drink and I know things. That's from Tyrion. He gets all the best lines, he really does, and he decides it'll be a good idea to go down and release the other two dragons who are still being kept captive. And him and Varys go down there. Varys stays at the top of the steps, and Tyrion goes down with a torch and tells the dragons a tale about his youth, how when he was young he asked for a small dragon for a birthday present, for a naming day gift. And when he was told that they were all dead, he cried all night. And as he's telling this story to the dragons, he releases one of them, and then the other one sort of like turns its neck and says, okay, me too, please. Yes, release me. And he goes over and releases them. So now both of these dragons are released. And he heads back up to Varys at the top of the stairs and poignantly tells him, look, if I ever have an idea like that again, just punch me in the face. I mean, it's a classic. I mean, Peter Dinklage nails it every time. The man is a class actor, and the way he delivers his lines is just fantastic. It really, really is. Um, but I've got to admit, I mean, there were some, although there were some very dire and, I'm sorry, me, um, dark scenes in this, there were also some funny scenes. I mean, at the beginning of the episode, you have some guy in King's Landing just basically regaling some people in a pub about how when Cersei was naked and walking through the city doing a walk of shame, he flashed her his, you know what, and she grinned at him. And everyone laughs, and it's a big joke. But then later on, he's on his own in an alley, you know, pissing up against the side of the wall, and the mountain turns up. And the guy sort of like turns around and looks up at the mountain, and the mountain just grabs his head and crushes it into the wall. And it's just, yeah, I laughed out loud. So I don't know really what that makes me, but it was a funny scene, and it really was. So you have these very dark and dramatic moments in this episode, and some levity as well, which, you know, it just makes it so much better. You head off to Braavos to see Arya again. Not much happens. Once again, she's on the street. Once again, she's getting bashed to pieces by that young waif with the quarterstaff. But then at the end, her mentor turns up and asks her, you know, what is her name? And she keeps saying, you know, who are you? And she keeps saying, I'm no one. And he asks her 3 times, offering her rewards each time. You know, I will give you a shelter over your head. Who are you? No one. Okay. If the girl tells me her name, I'll give her food. Who are you? No one. You know, if the girl tells me her name, I'll give her sight back. Who are you? And Arya sticks to her guns and says, no one. And he says, okay, follow me. And off they go. And that's it. That's it for Arya in that scene. It looks like the next episode you'll see a little bit more, perhaps where she's being trained up even further. I think they've got to push this storyline along a bit because it's starting to drag. And because they've only got 10 episodes and so many people to cover, so many characters to cover, so many places to go, they've got to put a fire under some of these storylines to get things moving. But that's all you see on that one. So you also get to see Bran finally makes a reappearance on Game of Thrones, still in the cave with the Three-Eyed Raven, Max von Sydow, and he's having a flashback of his father Eddard, Eddard's brother Benjen, and Lyanna, his sister, Eddard's sister, in Winterfell when they were kids, basically training. So that's pretty cool. And then that's pretty much it. The Three-Eyed Raven brings him out of the trance. He goes. You also see Hodor, who can actually speak in this flashback. So somewhere along the line, something happens to him. Obviously, some traumatic experience happens to him, which prevents him being able to speak. But in the flashback, he can speak just fine. But then that's pretty much it. That's about it. Nothing else happens with that. That's another short scene. Even though it's the first time he reappears, there's not much to that either. And that's pretty much it. That's the entire episode. So once again, another incredibly solid episode. Some major things happen. I mean, you lose Balon Greyjoy for a start, and you lose Roose Bolton. So 2 major characters are now dead. And it's setting things up. I'm really curious as to what's going to happen with Theon. You know, is he going back to the Iron Islands? What will happen when he gets there? Because none of this is covered in the books, so we don't know. But that'd be really interesting to see. And if Sansa goes up to the wall, you know, will Jon back her? I mean, why wouldn't he? You know, will some of the Northern Kingdoms rally around her? You know, I don't know. The dragons that Tyrion released, where are they going to go? Are they going to attack Meereen? Are they going to go looking for their mother, Daenerys? You know, we just don't know. There's so much to come. This is why I love this series so much. There's so many storylines, so many plot points, so many things you can you know, think about, chat about, guess, you know, and try and work out your own theories. It's why I love it so much. But that's pretty much it for the second episode. So that's it for the recap. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and we'll look forward to the next episode. See you guys later.